Welcome to another edition of Cal's Corner Online Radio here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Cal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is the one and only Rob McConnell. Folks, I'm honored, as I said last week, and I mean it from my heart, to have with us tonight for part two. He can even have a part 3, 4, 5. I don't care. It's up to him. Dr. Bruce Maccabee, who's a top UFO researcher. He has a pedigree in ufology of doing top research, if you will, going back decades. If you Google him on the internet, of course, you'll find a lot of his work. Bruce can also give you the URL of his website where he has many of his scientific papers published, and they're real scientific papers. This isn't a bunch of New Age hooey, which unfortunately dominates the so-called field of ufology. Now, we're going to continue here with part two. In part one, before the end of the show, Bruce kind of teased us, I have to call it that, where he talked about some breakthroughs coming up in the so-called Tic Tac case. We're going to back up a little bit because we need to talk a little bit about that case before Bruce can get to his point, so that people are familiar with it, because it is both a new and a older case, meaning it didn't happen exactly yesterday, but the public's awareness of it was, of course, years after the event supposedly happened. So I'll let Bruce take it from here. Bruce, can you describe for everybody listening to this what the so-called famous TikTok case is and why it is important, if it is important?
Well, it's a bit complicated, and I should point out that there is online interviews by the pilots involved, some of them anyway. So if you get a lot more detail from those interviews than I could give you in a short time here. But basically, the Nimitz carrier group, which includes the Nimitz aircraft carrier, submarine, and a bunch of airplanes, and a destroyer, were on training about 80 miles west of Baja, California. And they had been there for several days, and the people on radar had noticed these odd targets, radar targets, that were sort of appearing and then traveling some distance and disappearing, not being like ordinary aircraft that make a continual line across a screen as they are detected at every point. And so on the, I think it was the 14th of November, I might have the date wrong, but this is about 10 days into this training mission, and they're about to end it, and these objects appeared on their radar, and one of the people controlling the strike group asked the pilots to go to a certain location and see if they could see anything. And to make a long story short, they went there and, in fact, did see something way down at the surface of the ocean. One pilot, David Fravor, said he saw water, looked like water was boiling underneath there, a big whitish area. And then he noticed an object moving, which appeared to be cylindrical with rounded ends, like the shape of a candy known as Tic Tac. Mm-hmm. That's where the terminology came from. He described it as looking like a Tic Tac that was about 40 feet long, he thought.
Now, was this the same object or another object?
This was the first object, I think, that they actually saw. He saw it with naked eyes, yes.
Okay, so when he first sees it, it's above the water. It looks like it's either displacing water the way a helicopter might displace it if it hovered above the water, or, as he said, it looked like it may have been boiling water, perhaps from a propulsion system, we don't know. He sees it first above the water, then he sees it in another location. That's the part of the sighting you're talking about now?
Well, he saw it, and then he said it disappeared. It took off so fast it disappeared as far as he was concerned.
Okay, all right.
He had to fly back. The strike group, the Nimitz, launched another pair of planes. There were two planes in each group, F-18, and Fravor was the guy who talked the most. So his testimony is online in several places. The pilot of the other plane also saw something, same thing, but because he wasn't willing to talk as much. But anyway, Fravor and the other guy went back to the aircraft carrier, and the carrier launched 2 more planes. And it was in the second group of 2 that one of the guys, I'm not sure we even yet know who it was, took a video, infrared video of the object. And you can see this, the plane was tracking this dot. And what you see is the screen of a forward-looking infrared system, which lists a whole bunch of details of data, and the object itself between 2 vertical bars that indicate that the system has at least somewhat locked onto the target. And then all of a sudden it goes to the left and off the screen. And unfortunately, there was a mix-up on the part of the people investigating this. Investigators were mixed up by the fact that Fravor's testimony was applied to, combined with this video, as in fact they were independent events. The video was independent of Fravor's testimony.
Mm-hmm.
Fravor saw it the naked eye, whereas the other guy could only see the infrared for some reason or other. And we've been analyzing this infrared video. I did some measurements on the video. And it was claimed in Fravor's testimony that this object was very erratic and having high-speed maneuvers from one place to another, and then zipping off so fast it was like it disappeared. So I was looking for speed, indications of high speed on this video called the Tic Tac video. Mm-hmm. And I have to say I didn't find extreme speed. It was going at least as fast as the airplane because it was staying ahead of it. That would be, I don't know, 300-400 miles an hour. And then the thing took off to the left. It could have exceeded, it could have sped up, it could have just turned to the left, and we don't really know. All we know is the leftward component of the velocity suddenly increased, and it zipped off the screen, and they lost track of it. So that's about the situation, and we're trying to come up with a better estimate of how fast it might have been going.
Now, if it were flying roughly at the same speed, like you indicate, and then it banked left and they lost it, is it that they lost it because it just suddenly accelerated, or is they lost it because they were human and they lost it? What if it went into some clouds, for example?
Well, the video shows that it was trapped between these 2 vertical bars, indicating that it was being locked on by the FLIR system, and then suddenly turned. You see this leftward motion begin, and it goes off the screen at the left-hand side. So that could mean that they did a right-angle turn and went to the left, or it could mean that they simply sped up, going forward, a component of velocity in the forward direction, plus a component of velocity in the leftward direction, resulting in going off the screen. Can't really tell. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to confirm that there was extreme motion as indicated in David Fravor's testimony.
So
there's a lot more coming. So people who track this stuff know there's supposedly more videos coming there. There were 2 more videos after the Tic Tac one. Another one that was taken in the same time frame, and one that was taken much more recently. So we haven't heard the end of this story yet.
Well, I understand why we haven't, and I know that your descriptions of it are just very surface level, and it's not your fault, and it's not a criticism. It's just that it would take hours to go into the fine detail, and it is fascinating. For me, the case is important because it's either the real thing or it's not. It's binary in this case. If it is the real thing, the ramifications are incalculable. If it is not the real thing, then we've got a issue with the U.S. government, perhaps, as well as UFO researchers. And while it is nothing new to have some sort of scandal where concerned UFO researchers, the idea that the U.S. government or elements of it or certain personnel are working with UFO researchers to play them as some sort of useful idiot or to drive some sort of agenda, whether agreed on or not known, that to me is in its own way more profound, I guess, than if it were real aliens. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, of course, every potential explanation plays in the game. However, we seem to be getting testimony from people who run the carrier group operations. You would think they wouldn't be part of, unless they were part of a government orchestrated cover-up, they wouldn't be covering up stuff on their own. They would be saying what they experienced. Now, let me tell you one more thing about this Tic Tac event. I spoke to the guy who was operating the radar at the time. And he said that he was seeing these things. They're starting, he first detected them near Catalina Island off the coast of California. And they were traveling southward at an altitude of 28,000 feet at 100 miles an hour. Now, guess what? There aren't many aircraft that can go at 100 miles an hour because it's such a slow speed.
Right.
These things were going lazily along, and then all of a sudden one of them would drop downwards. And he could practice.
Okay, we have to take a commercial break. We'll be right back, and we'll continue with this. Be right back, Bruce.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV. Plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
We live in rapidly shifting times of extreme volatility and uncertainty. Such profound change brings a unique opportunity for the evolution of consciousness. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, host of Mission Evolution Radio Show, a program that explores the latest scientific developments and deepening spiritual truths supporting human evolution. Join me on xzbn.net, where I interview leading experts in science, physics, medicine, spirituality, and more. By applying divergent viewpoints to leading-edge topics, we uncover expansive and evolutionary truth to assist you on your path to enlightenment. More information and past episodes are available at missionevolution.org.
Welcome back, folks, to segment 2 here on Cal's Corner, here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Cal Corfin. I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Now, before I had to interrupt Bruce, our guest here, because of commercial break, he was describing another incident, if I understand him correctly, where pilots had first reported this when they were flying, what was it, around 22,000 feet?
They reported it, yeah. But the guy who was watching the radar saw these things. He said that sometimes things would come in from 80,000 feet, which is the upper limit of the radar, and go zipping downwards to the surface. But a number that he actually quoted me, he said that many times they were traveling it along, it might be 10 or so of them at one time, traveling at 100 miles an hour southward from the area around Catalina Island where they first detected, traveling southward, and then for some reason or other, one or more of them would drop downwards from 28,000 feet to the surface of the ocean, essentially, 50 feet above or whatever. And the guy said he was able to track them on this SPY spy radar on the Aegis naval ship. Mm-hmm. Some of the best radar in the world.
Yeah.
He saw these things drop downwards, and he said he measured the time it took for it to get from 28,000 feet down to the surface. Turned out to be 0.78 seconds.
0.78, not even 1 second.
0.78. I rounded that off to 0.8 of a second. Mm-hmm. And then I calculated. I said, suppose, for example, you're starting at a zero velocity, a zero vertical velocity. You got a horizontal velocity of 100 miles an hour, but a zero vertical velocity, and you put the pedal to the metal and start an acceleration. Imagine it accelerating at a constant rate to halfway down to 14,000 feet, and then decelerating at the same acceleration rate, but in the opposite direction. So you stop at the bottom 0 feet. So you go from 28,000 to 14,000, speeding up, and then from 14,000 to 0, slowing down. Mm-hmm. If you do that, this is making an assumption that we can't confirm, but it's a good guess anyway. It puts us in the ballpark. Mm-hmm. If you do that, you find you get 175,000 Gs, or no, 175,000 feet per second squared, which is 5,000 times the acceleration of gravity. In order to achieve this in 0.8 of a second, in 0.8 of a second, you travel 28,000 feet. You speed up for half the trip, slow down for half the trip, and when you do that, it requires 175,000 feet per second squared, or about 5,000 times the acceleration of gravity. And when you reach your maximum velocity, which is at 14,000 feet, in other words, you're accelerating from zero vertical velocity to 14,000 to a maximum vertical velocity at 14,000 feet. You're traveling at 48,000 miles per hour. Now that's beyond what we can do.
Okay, so the things that stand out in my mind hearing you describe this is there's basically two sets of witnesses. One group is in aircraft. They detect this at 22,000 feet. They confirm it's kind of weird that an airplane, quote unquote, would go down to a speed of 100 miles an hour. That's hard to do. That's hard to keep it in the air. Nobody with any sanity would disagree with that. Then this altitude drop, which, as you point out, you can roughly assume, or dare I say safely presume, that the deceleration began at around the 50% point because it's got to slow down, otherwise it hits the water. The consistent pattern seems to be in more than one sighting that it's above the water for some reason. Let me ask you this. Could it be this secret spaceplane device or these things that the U.S. government has admitted that they did test in the area, the hypertransport vehicles? Now, curiously, they say they lost them over the ocean, but it wouldn't be the first time that the U.S. government has, quote, lost something that was really a cover story for, we don't want you to know what we really did or what really happened to it. Could it be one of those?
Well, I always say it would have to be a top-level cover-up operation because with a carrier strike group out there doing maneuvers, you can bet that they know everything that's in the volume of space that they are doing their testing in. You're not going to get any balloons or any birds or any Cessna aircraft or any F-18 aircraft or MiGs or whatever in there without them knowing about it. If there was a top-level orchestrated hoax, essentially, the guys doing the measurements wouldn't be part of the hoax. They're doing their job. Somebody is pulling a fast one on them by having some high-speed aircraft travel through, although 48,000 miles an hour is a little bit high for anything that we can fly.
Well, I'm not saying it is that, as in I've got the proof or something, but there's a couple things, a handful of things. I could probably count them on one hand. Let me do it real quickly, and please, I want to know your thoughts on these because I want to make sure that I'm thinking the same way that I hope is the right way to think on this. And we're doing this, of course, for the sake of people listening to this because, as you know, there's been problems with the coverage by this on this case by the New York Times. There's issues of provenance, and it's important that fact be separated from fiction. And the good news is, in this case, at least up to a point, we can do that, whereas in some other UFO cases, it boils down to he said, she said. First point is, I know for a fact, and I'm sure, especially with your background, you would agree with this, I'm not always impressed by cases where a guy says, I'm working the computer or my radar and I see suddenly 15 UFOs and I don't know where the hell they came from, etc. I know that there are ECM, electro countermeasure technologies. Israel uses them against Syria all the time to make it seem they have these decoy devices that make radar networks get a reading that looks like this, but it's really this. They can imitate all kinds of airplanes, friendlies, unfriendlies, you name it. And they use these as decoys or covers to hide the true nature of what's really going on. So to me, a more important case would have to be I saw it as well as where my instrument said it should have been there. That's where the visual stuff comes in, and there seems to be this consistency, and the behavior patterns seem to be a bit consistent in you've got the water and so on. What bothers me about the case is why would the U.S. government, if they have this secret team that's investigated UFOs and has helped cover it up for decades now, let's call them a real X-Files team. You've alluded to this in the past. Why would they need someone like a Robert Bigelow or a Harry Reid to fund money, around $22 million or so, to study this issue if there's already this effort going on? Wouldn't somebody have said this is a bit redundant? Or why go to people like that, Bigelow and those with that kind of background, to get to the bottom of something? To me, that's as bizarre as my going to the Billy Meyer UFO cult to find out the truth about UFOs. No, thank you.
Well, of course, anything I say on this with respect to the political cover-up aspects has to be considered to be speculation because I don't have any direct knowledge of this AATIP program other than what we've read people talk about and so on. If there was a deep black program going on, and say had been since the 1940s and 50s, it was buried so deeply that the people who set up the AATIP program didn't know anything about the one that was already existing. And the one that was already existing wouldn't tell them because they're trying to remain super deep black.
Right.
For whatever the reason would be. So they already admitted that this AATIP program was covered up, not known by most people. Mm-hmm. Only a couple of Harry Reid and Inouye and the guy from Alaska, as I recall. The politicians who made the money okay to spend on this in this way, and supposedly they went with a typical what's it called, broad area source request. We want somebody who's going to do a certain job for a certain amount of, and they have to tell us how they're going to do this job for a certain amount of time and for a certain amount of money and what the output will be and so on. Basically to get a contract signed. My guess is it was slanted towards Bigelow's operation because he already was putting money into it, and but it was an open source request for people to respond to an open source document saying we want somebody who's going to do this job, and it could be that Bigelow was the only person who answered, who did the grunt work that's associated with obtaining a contract from the government. The combination of the fact that Bigelow had already put money into the subject would have given him a leg up on most other organizations. When you put out a request for a proposal, RFP, when writing what this proposal is supposed to say you're going to do, the initial request can be slanted in a certain way that you're more likely to pick up contractors A, B, and C than you are contractors C, D, and E.
Yeah, it's yeah, absolutely. And we're not saying that necessarily happened. It's just that I understand why, because I've heard these arguments before, that people get confused over what did happen. And we'll come back to that point in a moment after the commercial break here.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Demo.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world, interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to segment 3 here on Cal's Corner Radio Show here on the X-Zone Broadcasts Network. My name is Cal Korf, I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Joining us again here is the famous Dr. Bruce Maccabee, who's a top UFO researcher. We were just talking about the famous Tic Tac UFO case, and he was going over some of the history involved in it and some of the unique elements. To briefly recap things, the U.S. government has had kind of a Swiss cheese approach to studying the subject of UFOs, at least publicly. I knew the late Dr. J. Allen Hynek from when I was a young boy, up, of course, until he died. Dr. Hynek was not only a friend of mine, but he provided guidance and even some quotes for my Meyer expose book, Spacious of the Pleiades, the Bailey Meyer story. And he told me one time that he was really frustrated with what had happened during his tenure as the scientific advisor for the Air Force's Project Blue Book, because he said that there were meetings he'd go to where he knew that the CIA was lying to him, that they had done something, that they didn't bother telling the Air Force or working any channel to let him know that this object that somebody had seen was really one of their whatevers. And he had brought up the SR-71 as a specific point to that. Now, from what I've seen, Bruce, you've got what seems to be just a real mess here. You've got the CIA in the past has launched entire aircraft programs where at some point during that process, as this thing has even been deployed, they tell the Air Force finally, oh yeah, by the way, that was us. You have a group of people who in the past have had government connections who like to mess with UFO researchers and use them to further whatever agenda, whether it be real or not. Now, my issue is how this whole thing was handled. Let's say it is something benign and completely like you say. Bigelow was the contractor. He won the contract. Others may have applied. Who knows? It was straight up through the front door. Of course, Bigelow would have an advantage. He's a wealthy individual, so he's got a lot more money. And even I might consider hiring him over a group like MUFON nowadays. But what bothers me is when this thing is labeled as disclosure, when I'm not seeing Pentagon officials coming out and saying, yep, that was us, or guess what, folks? Yeah, you have people who are retiring from DOD and others, but I don't see this formal through the front door thing. And then when you chase down the provenance of some of the videos, there are interesting videos, but there's always something that seems to be missing. You yourself have had interactions with the CIA on the subject of UFOs. You were asked to prepare a briefing. Can you share with the audience what happened in your own interactions when you were asked years ago during Clinton's presidency to prepare a briefing about UFOs?
Well, of course, that's a long story, and has nothing to do with the Tic Tac stuff we've been talking about because it precedes it by many years. I was investigating a UFO case in New Zealand in 1978, and it's very complicated with radar and movies and multiple witnesses and all sorts of stuff. And I was looking for some consultation on the radar aspects, and a physics professor suggested that I contact the CIA, and so I did that. The CIA called me, a guy called and said, we will comment on your radar if you will tell us what happened on this sighting that occurred in New Zealand. So that's how I sort of became connected with the CIA, and that was in 1979. And I went to the headquarters a couple of times and then didn't go anymore. 5 years later, I get a phone call from my CIA agent who was interested in the work I was doing for the Navy at the time, generating underwater sound with lasers, what I call laser zapping. And he has detected, he had found the Russians were doing the same sort of work. He wanted to know what the state of the art was from our point of view to compare with what he was getting off the literature on the Russians. So that's how I got to know this guy, Ron Pandolfi. And I had a number of discussions with him over the years. Mostly we were talking about the program, which is related to anti-submarine warfare, program of generating underwater sound with lasers. And so for the next 10 years, I would go to the CIA headquarters and discuss this with them. And of course, we also discussed topic A, which was UFOs, one way or another. And in 1993, Clinton took office, and his science advisor was a man by the name of Dr. John Gibbons. And as this coincided with an attempt by Lawrence Rockefeller and C.B. Jones and some other people to get the Clinton administration to open up the files on UFOs.
Who was the science advisor again? When you mentioned his name, it was garbled.
Dr. John Gibbons.
Dr. John Gibbons. Okay, go ahead, sir. The
whole story on this is told in the book, The FBI-CIA UFO Connection, which I published in 2014.
And people can get that at Amazon.com.
That's right.
People can get that book detailing this that you wrote from at Amazon.com.
Right.
Okay.
So anyway, I had known Ron now for about 10 years when I got a phone call from him. I was at home doing some work at my house, and I get a phone call from Ron saying, I want you, he said, hello, how are you, all that sort of stuff, and then, can you write a UFO briefing for the President's science advisor? And I nearly fell off my chair.
Mm-hmm.
They get a request to talk about UFO, anything with the science advisor, to say nothing of UFOs. So Ron explained to me that Gibbons had been contacted by Lawrence Rockefeller, Rockefeller being a big donor to the Democratic Party, could push his weight around, and he wanted to get a hearing with the president, but Bill Clinton, but the science advisor basically said he's got to get through me first. So, okay, Lawrence Rockefeller wasn't totally on the up and up. He told Gibbons that he wanted to talk about advanced science or something like that. He didn't come out and say UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
And then subsequently, however, Ron Pandolfi knew that this request had been made, and he told Gibbons that what they really wanted to talk about was UFOs. And he says, when Gibbons heard the term UFOs, he nearly froze in his seat because people on the top levels don't want to hear about such weird stuff. Anyway, I never was able to get a straight answer on why Pandolfi called me. It could be because he knew that I knew more about the UFO subject than he did, or it could be that he didn't want the science advisor to think the CIA knew anything about UFOs. Whatever, he calls me up and says, "Can you get a briefing to the science advisor?" And I immediately started thinking, well, it'll be a week or two from now, and I'll do a dog and pony show type of thing with lots of graphs and PowerPoint presentation and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then Pandolfi says it's got to be done by tomorrow. And immediately my brain started thinking about how the hell am I going to do this in a day. And then Pandolfi says it's got to be ready by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. This was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesday. It had to be ready at 8 o'clock on Wednesday.
Nothing like advance notice.
Yeah, that's right. And I was completely floored, but I tackled the problem anyway and wrote a sheet and a half. Took the format of a executive color story, executive page and a half, that outlines the whole story with references to what are called tabs that amplify on the information. Tab A, Tab B, Tab C are related to various subjects called out in the executive format. And I actually did fax this page and a half to Gibbons' office, and then I found out later that they had held, 8 o'clock was the time limit I had been given, I found out later on they had a meeting at 7:30.
So they actually did hold the meeting.
They did hold the meeting, but it was half an hour before my paper got there. Gibbons wanted this. He had asked Pandolfi if he could get some briefing on UFOs, so that's what writing this briefing paper was about, to brief Gibbons on the subject, so he would seem like a complete dummy when Lawrence Rockefeller and C.B. Scott Jones came in.
So they hold the meeting, your paper's not there, so what kind of briefing did they receive?
Well, I don't know.
Okay. Now, you mentioned there's no connection to Tic Tac, but you also mentioned Pandolfi. That, to my opinion, is a connection because he's involved in the curious way that this whole Tic Tac thing has been worked, and it seems to me that he has been involved with UFO researchers long enough where he's certainly been in a position working the CIA's so-called Weird Desk. I guess the CIA's version of we'll be back after Nick Hope. We'll be back after the commercial break here. Nick Pope.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howe will expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
The concept of a new age has been around since the late 19th century, yet much of its original meaning has been lost. What exactly is the new age? Is it a religion, a collection of obscure esoteric practices, a series of doomsday predictions, or an astrological event? The New Age Chronicles is a unique, complementary publication bringing reason and grounded information to separate fact from fiction. chock full of valuable information to support you as we make the monumental shift into the new era. You won't want to miss a single innovative issue. The New Age Chronicles newspaper is coming soon to www.newagechronicles.com.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on Cal's Corner radio show. My name is Cal Korf, and I'm your host. And the executive producer of the show, once again, is Rob McConnell. My guest today for part two of his special pair of appearances is Dr. Bruce Maccabee, who's a top UFO researcher. We were talking about the famed TikTok UFO case and government involvement in UFOs during the course of the show. To go ahead and wrap up this part of it and bring this back to where we started the Kenneth Arnold sighting so we can come full circle here. Bruce, I'll lay it out at least from what I see. I'm not saying what I'm saying is correct. You're more of an expert on this case especially than I am. But I remember covering as a journalist back in 2011, 2012 from India. I wrote articles as part of my defense in space beat, if you will, on the hypersonic vehicles that at that time could go at least 22 times faster than the speed of sound. So whatever our official public bar is for having unmanned aircraft, drone craft that can go to ramjet and scramjet speeds, the reality is we're even further into this than publicly being admitted. I don't have a problem with that, and I'm not saying that this explains the cases. Then you have advances in electronic warfare, which can make a radar unit appear to be tracking 15 F-18 aircraft, and the next minute it's 22 F-35s. They can fool these signatures. I'm not saying, again, that causes it. When you take this layers of secrecy that have emerged over the years, now you've got Space Force, which presumably would take custody of the UFO issue, right? The Air Force and CIA have battled each other for many years, as well as the FBI, as you know. Turf wars over, who gets the UFO territory. Air Force ultimately won those arguments as far as I know, but yet there have been exceptions. Now you've got this going on. Now you've got a CIA weird desk. You've got Pandolfi, who's the equivalent, I guess, of Nick Pope from the UK. He worked the MODS UFO desk, as you know. Pandolfi seems to interact with UFO researchers, disseminate data. He's married to a Pakistani woman who claims to have, she's into all kinds of weird loopy things. I, of course, lived in Punjab for 7 years. I know about her background and her NGO. We were covering some of this from India, and it seems to me that people like Pandolfi are playing UFO researchers, people who mean very well and want the truth to come out, but then it's being spoon-fed to them in ways that why don't they just release the whole thing? Why don't we have the whole files on these videos, the radar trackings? Was it really government disclosure? If you put an asterisk down there and you explain that it's kind of selective, I don't understand why this convolution, is taking place. When you start bringing in portals, you've got a story today in Las Vegas where a guy claims that he's measured the first disparity of time between Vegas and some other location. Who knows if it's true or not, but all of this stuff seems to be a convoluted mess, and the media has blown their coverage of it. I don't envy somebody like you who's trying to sort all this out. Do you see this as a mess and a mixture of things as well, or am I just imagining all these things?
Yeah, there's no doubt a mixture of an awful lot of stuff because we're working with a phenomenon that hasn't been nailed down yet as to exactly what it is. I've managed to, in a sense, stay above the fray by let somebody else do all the theorizing about what's going on. Stick to the individual cases and try to get any data out of them. The first thing you have to do, though, is to decide whether or not any particular sighting is really unexplainable, or if it is if it is, can be explained reasonably. Reasonable explanation would have to be something that obeys physics and is agreed upon by at least a small number of people. Somebody agrees that a particular explanation makes sense. It's easy to see how some explanations that are offered don't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Studying the Kenneth Arnold case you referred to, we just went past the 71st anniversary of the Kenneth Arnold sighting, which gave birth to the term flying saucers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's a microcosm of this whole subject, because you have the initial report, the shock value of the initial report causing news stories to be circulated literally around the world within the first week or two of his sighting. And then a reaction that sets in. Well, more and more people come forward and say, I saw something weird up in the sky. A reaction sets in, which is that all these people are nuts. And the Air Force denied that it had anything to do with flying saucers. So the media, after several weeks, began to poo-poo the whole subject, and it sort of dropped out of when the sighting rate went back down after a big rise in sighting rate from the third week in June to the second week in July.
Mm-hmm.
After that big rise in sightings, and there may have been well over 1,000 sightings throughout the United States at that point, during that time, after this big sighting flap, the news media started to make fun of the witnesses because nobody was coming up with any good, solid explanations. And of course, the idea that these are extraterrestrials did play a little bit of a role in the explanations, but they were going to require something like hard evidence to prove. And of course, the Roswell case came along and basically shut the whole thing down. The Roswell case, people should realize, existed as a UFO case for like one day.
Mm-hmm.
Made major news media because it was, we thought we've got one. And then the next day, General Ramey says, oh, we haven't got one after all. And the Roswell case didn't play a role in ufology for another 30 years.
Right.
So anyway, if you look at the Kenneth Arnold case, you find immediately the thing that made me angry. I got angry after reading UFO sightings, and were witnesses who seemed to be normal, totally normal people, confronted with abnormal circumstances, saying what they thought, what they knew, and then being told they were idiots for saying something like that. In the case of the Kenneth Arnold, the official Air Force explanation is it was a mirage. And as a physicist, I knew that mirages, a mirage of the mountaintop, if you're up at an altitude comparable to the top of a mountain, and the air temperature as a function of vertical altitude in the atmosphere is just right, so-called temperature inversion effect, you can get a inverted image of the top of the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
You see the top of the mountain directly, and then you also see something like a weird mirror image of the top of the mountain upside down. So somebody had suggested that since there are a lot of mountains around Mount Rainier, that somehow Kenneth Arnold had mistaken the mountaintop mirages for flying saucers.
Yeah.
But you ask yourself, what's one of the key parts of Arnold's description was that these things are first seen far to his left, to the north, and they traveled right across in front of him, even in front of the Mount Rainier, and then down southward. Point being that they were going from left to right, lateral motion at a very high velocity. The mountaintop mirages stay over the tops of the mountains. They don't go left, right at all. They just stay there.
Right.
So why in the world would the Air Force propose an explanation that was physically impossible? That was one question. Why did the Air Force mostly, but other quote scientific explanations were scientists would offer explanations. And then the other thing was Lost my train of thought.
Well, I think...
oh, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Air Force could get away with proposing explanations that made no sense. Like, for example, saying that the witness saw the planet Venus when the astronomers can prove that the planet Venus was on the other side of the Earth at the time, or whatever. And what was it?
Well, they have a history of coming up with these explanations. One of the things that shocked...
Another thing that bothered me was, once these explanations have been published, why didn't the scientific community undertake to verify or reject the explanations? The Air Force got away with some stupid explanations because the scientific community would not speak up about it. That sort of pissed me off.
Yeah, I understand, and you're right to feel that way. I think any decent, concerned human being would feel that way, and they should feel that way. The media, of course, also drops the ball. What surprised me when I read the New York Times story was, if it is as they reported, keyword if, always an issue with New York Times and a lot of media nowadays, unfortunately. And this is independent of the issue of Donald Trump, but I've noticed, as have you, the way the media has covered issues like UFOs over the decades has been a joke. And they don't understand it, but I don't understand why the New York Times doesn't have a team of reporters on this tic-tac case and story if the story really happened the way they reported it. They've dropped the ball. It's ridiculous.
You're not the only one who wonders why the New York Times claimed that they had vetted the whole story.
Yeah.
They were willing to put it in the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that they would have reacted to the reaction. There was a sudden heightened interest in the subject as a result of that story. But does that get them to continue investigating it? No. It was just like the Chicago O'Hare case.
Yeah, they dropped the ball. Bruce, thank you for being on the show. We'll absolutely talk again. We have to go. Thanks to everyone for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com, or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.